Somewhere in a General Motors design archive, there is a file that was supposed to stay closed forever. A brand that GM itself declared dead in 2004, buried with more dignity than most automotive obituaries receive, was never supposed to see a showroom floor again. And yet here it is, standing in front of me right now, wearing a nameplate that an entire generation of engineers grew up believing they would never get to work on again. Welcome back to Premium Automotive Reviews, where we look past the marketing language and ask what a car actually means, not just what it claims to be. And this one means something complicated, because buried inside this car's chassis architecture is a decision that GM's own product planners fought over for months. A decision about what this car was allowed to share with its corporate siblings and what it absolutely could not. A decision that determines whether this is a genuine revival or an expensive costume. We'll get to that. First, let it exist in front of you. The color is a warm champagne pearl, something GM's paint division apparently spent real time developing, because it shifts from a soft ivory in shade to something closer to aged gold under direct sun. It is not a color chosen to be safe. It is a color chosen to look expensive standing still. The proportions are wide, genuinely wide, a stance that pushes the fenders outward with a wide body aggression that immediately separates this from anything wearing a bow tie or a blue oval badge. The hood carries twin carbon fiber heat extraction vents, deep and functional, mesh-lined and angular, positioned with an intent that tells you forced induction lives underneath before a single spec sheet confirms it. The Oldsmobile script sits pressed into a blacked-out horizontal grille bar, flanked by sharp LED headlamp clusters that cut a narrow, focused signature rather than a wide, friendly one. This front end is not trying to be liked. It is trying to be respected. Move along the flank, and the carbon fiber side blades ahead of the doors are not decoration. They are functional brake cooling ducts feeding air directly to the front rotors, a detail borrowed from endurance racing philosophy rather than streetcar styling trends. The 442 badge sits quiet on the front fender, small, confident. Unwilling to shout for attention, it has already earned through 8 decades of meaning something to people who know. The roofline sweeps back in a low, tense arc toward a full carbon rear wing mounted on twin adjustable risers, and behind it, the Cutlass script spans the rear deck lid in brushed metal lettering, flanked by full-width LED taillamps that glow with a deep, layered red signature. Beneath them, a deeply finned carbon diffuser houses quad exhaust outlets, arranged in a symmetrical 2/2 pattern, and the wheels, staggered forged multi-spoke units polished to a mirror finish, fill the arches so completely that the suspension geometry had to be re-engineered specifically to allow this fitment in production form. Now the decision. GM's engineering leadership was reportedly split on whether the 442 should share its underlying platform architecture openly with other performance nameplates in the portfolio, the way badge-engineered muscle cars have quietly done for decades, or whether it deserved a chassis tune, suspension geometry, and structural bracing unique enough to justify standing on its own. The team that won that argument chose the harder, more expensive path. This car carries a bespoke front and rear subframe tune, unique spring rates, unique anti-roll bar diameters, and a hydraulic body brace system connecting the rear shock towers directly to the chassis floor, borrowed conceptually from track homologation practice. It costs more to engineer, it costs more to build, and it means this car does not drive like a familiar platform wearing a new name. It drives like something GM's engineers were quietly proud enough of to fight for internally. Pull the door open and it swings with genuine mass, sealing shut with a low pressurized thud that tells you the body structure underneath earned its stiffness the expensive way. Step down into the seat and black leather receives you, deeply bolstered, stitched with a precision that runs in clean parallel lines across the door panels and dash. The 442 badge sits embossed into the steering wheel hub and repeated in brushed metal across the center console, understated enough that it never feels like a costume prop. The dashboard architecture is driver-focused, a digital instrument cluster framed by real carbon fiber trim, flanked by a portrait-oriented touchscreen that sits integrated rather than bolted on as an afterthought. Physical climate controls remain. A rotary shifter sits low in the console, and the cabin carries that specific scent of fresh leather and warm carbon that never quite fades from a car built with genuine intention. Close the door, and the outside world recedes into near silence, the kind of acoustic isolation that makes the eventual engine note feel like a deliberate choice rather than an intrusion. The engine is a supercharged 6.2-liter V8, internally projected by Oldsmobile's performance division at approximately 780 horsepower and 705 pound-feet of torque, sending power exclusively to the rear wheels through an 8-speed automatic with a manual shift gate and paddle control. At startup, the engine catches with a heavy, mechanical bark before settling into an uneven, loping idle, a rhythm you feel through the seat cushion before you consciously register it as sound. Roll into the throttle gently, and the supercharger whine builds beneath the exhaust note, layered and mechanical. Commit fully, and the exhaust stops being polite, detonating through those quad outlets in long, physical waves that you feel in your chest, more than you hear in your ears. Lift off, and the active exhaust valves allow a controlled crackle on deceleration, a small reminder of what the car was just doing. Move it for the first time, and the steering communicates road texture with a directness that feels earned rather than artificially injected. Turn-in is immediate, the front end loading confidently before the rear follows with a balance that speaks to that reworked suspension geometry. In its default setting, the ride absorbs broken pavement without wallowing, composed enough for genuine daily use. And in its sharpest setting, the body flattens through direction changes with a discipline that rewards a committed driver without punishing a cautious one. The brakes, 6-piston front calipers, gripping large ventilated rotors, respond with a progressive bite that builds trust within the first few hard stops. On an open desert 2-lane at dusk, engine settled into a steady cruise, supercharger whine humming just beneath the exhaust. This car finds a version of itself that a showroom floor can never fully explain. The honest limitation sits right where you would expect it to. Rear-wheel drive only, at nearly 800 horsepower, means this car demands genuine respect from its driver in cold or wet conditions. And Oldsmobile's engineers made no apology for that choice, believing that a car wearing this badge should reward skill rather than remove the need for it. Estimated pricing lands between $78,000 and $92,000, depending on specification, a number that positions the 442 directly against established European and domestic performance coupes that never had to justify their own existence the way this car does. What you are paying for here is not simply horsepower or carbon trim. You are paying for a corporate decision, expensive and unnecessary by spreadsheet logic, to give a dead brand a chassis worth respecting rather than a name worth exploiting. The 2027 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 occupies a strange, singular position in the current market. It is not quite a legacy revival in the nostalgic sense, because most of its intended buyers never drove the original. It is not simply a modern muscle icon either, because the engineering effort behind its bespoke chassis tunes argues for something more serious than a badge exercise. It sits somewhere between resurrection and reinvention, a segment of one built by people inside a massive corporation who apparently still cared enough to make the harder argument in the boardroom. The person this car was built for is someone who understands that a name only means something if the engineering underneath earns it. Someone who has grown tired of watching discontinued brands get quietly erased from automotive memory, and who wants proof that a company can occasionally choose meaning over convenience. Before we close, here is a genuinely divisive question worth sitting with. GM chose to spend real engineering money giving a revived brand its own bespoke chassis tune, rather than simply badge engineering a familiar platform. Was that the right use of resources in a market where most buyers would never have known the difference? Or does that kind of unnecessary integrity matter more than it should in an industry that has quietly stopped bothering with it? Both positions deserve real consideration. Leave your answer below, and if stories like this one are why you keep coming back, subscribe, because 2027 still has more of these arguments left to make. The 2027 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 is proof that some names refuse to stay buried and refuse to come back cheap.